Welcome to Financial Issues, where we join reality with truth, helping you make the most of your money by honoring God with your investments. Now listen in as we give you the practical tools and advice you need to become a biblically responsible investor.
Good morning. Welcome to Financial Issues. Thanks for tuning in today. I'm your host, Shana. Going to be here with you for a little while. And our phone lines are open. If you want to get your call queued up now, the number 610-363-1110. If you've got questions about financial issues, whether they are stewardship related to our biblically responsible investment strategy. Maybe you're a new listener on one of the new CSN stations. And if you are, we welcome you. We thank you for tuning in today. And we talk about all things stewardship. So we're going to get to a stewardship verse of the day a little bit later in the show. But we're also going to talk about the markets. We're going to talk about biblically responsible investing, which is a way that a practical way that we give our partners to structure their investments, to screen out the companies that are funding a dark agenda. We call it defunding darkness because we don't want to be yoked with the world who is funding things like abortion, pornography, the LGBTQ agenda. That is the most important thing, that we recognize that God owns it all and that our right response is that we want to honor God in the way that we do everything, but specifically, our main mission is to help you in the way that you invest. So, Financial Issues is a ministry that helps to educate people about financial issues from a biblical worldview. Again, phone lines are open. If you want to be the first one in the queue, 610-363-1110 is how you get into the queue. We're also streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, and Rumble. You can post comments or questions there, as well as the website, financialissues.org, and get in on the lively chat. Let's turn to some financial issues, some financial news. The biggest financial news yesterday and continuing in today, with new developments happening all the time and maybe even while we're on the air today. But the biggest financial news yesterday was the markets. So the three major indices landed in much different territory. The Dow was up 0.65%. The S&P 500 was down almost 1.5%. And the NASDAQ, which is a very tech-heavy indice, was down 3.7% yesterday. So what happened? Why are the three market indices so differently affected? Let's just jump right into it. So what happened yesterday? Well, China fired back. So, we've been talking for a while about the ban on TikTok, or maybe the forced buyout, which, by the way, the newest news this morning is that Microsoft is in talks with TikTok to potentially buy it. We've had all of this tariff talk, so we're escalating the economic warfare that's been happening for a long time. And we don't really expect China to embrace Trump's MAGA agenda, do we? No, we have people in this country who don't even embrace the MAGA agenda, even though the MAGA agenda at its root is to make America great again. How can you be an American and not want America to be great, not buy into American exceptionalism? So what happened? So DeepSeek is a Chinese artificial intelligence company, and they specialize in the development of open source large language models. So, for those of you who don't quite get all of the whole AI workings, I don't either. I don't consider myself an expert in the technology, but on the business side of it, I think that is one of the biggest stories. So this Chinese company was established only in 2023. It's based in China, so it operates under the ownership of the Chinese hedge fund High Flyer, which, because it's in China, is subject to Chinese laws and Chinese rule. So it is the Chinese answer to OpenAI's ChatGPT and potentially its main competition at this point. The Chinese say that it's that their product or their source is cheaper it's better and it's more energy efficient than what we've got. So on January 27th, which was yesterday, DeepSeek announced the release of its latest AI model, R1. And the DeepSeek app became the #1 downloaded app on the Apple Store. So this sent ripples through the markets, through the technology community, and shares of major tech companies experienced significant declines. NVIDIA's stock, I don't know what point it was the lowest. I saw it down more than 20% yesterday, but I think it ended the day down about 18 or 19%, leading to the biggest market loss in history to the tune of about $600 billion because the price of NVIDIA dropped so much. Other tech giants, including Microsoft, Palantir, Alphabet, also saw their stock prices decrease. Okay, so why the big market reaction? If it's true that China has a better, cheaper, and more cost-efficient AI and supposedly didn't need NVIDIA's best chip and as many of them as other companies say that they need, because that chip has not been allowed to be sold to them in a big way, then the price of NVIDIA and other technology companies is no longer warranted, and that's why the stock price dropped so much. Now, the high flyers have high prices because of what investors believe and have believed about their current demand and future growth. So you have all of these technology companies coming out and saying AI is the future. We've got the best chip. You know, everybody wants our chip. We have this backlog on chip. And so NVIDIA and other companies have these really high, people are willing to pay a whole lot of money to get those chips. And that's what's driven those prices up. Now, even the S&P 500 are very heavily weighted in these technology companies. You've heard us talk about the Magnificent Seven. You've heard us talk about how concentrated the performance results, how much is attributed to of these companies attributes to the overall market performance. So, you know, this whole idea that China's coming out and firing back this shop, I mean, I believe it's rooted in just economic warfare, because I think the sell-off was, let's sell it now and ask questions later. That's often what Wall Street does. That's often what traders do. Now, here at Financial Issues, we do not have a trading philosophy. We have a long-term investor-based model. So whenever you buy into a company, you're taking an ownership position in a company that we believe is going to do well over the long term. So, you know, even between the time that I started preparing for today's show, there was more news that came out. There was a cybersecurity incident last night with DeepSeek. They had a cyber attack that led to the company being temporarily having to limit new user registrations. So lots of things, you know, have been happening here. And I think my initial reaction, now there's, like I said, there's news coming out all the time, is that it was really an overreaction. We wrote some, we gave some information to partners yesterday on the partner side of the website. We post commentary for the partners once a week, typically on a Monday afternoon to evening time frame, sharing with partners kind of what we're thinking and how it's impacting our strategy. So, notice you didn't see any sell orders come out yesterday. I personally did not make any trades in my own account or my client accounts, didn't sell anything. I think that we really have to wait until the dust settles. The market is in the midst of digesting what is happening. In fact, it looks like there's going to be somewhat of a reversal this morning. So the NASDAQ is indicating that it's going to open in positive territory, not in a big way, but up 0.2%. The S&P 500, similar, up 16 basis points. The Dow is indicating a negative open, probably on the Boeing news. So if you look at the three different indices, they're made up of much different companies. The Dow is, 30 companies. not really as tech heavy. The NASDAQ is super tech heavy. The S&P 500, just because of the way that it's composed and calculated, it is very dependent on these technology names. So, it's yet to be determined if this is just a great buying opportunity, because, even with a 20% drop in some of these companies, they're still have pretty lofty valuations. So, at the end of the day, does it matter which AI model is best? I think we're still going to need a lot of energy. There's still going to be companies that benefit greatly from using AI. And so, bottom line is that I think most things were overdone at this point. All right, folks, stay tuned. We're going to be back with more financial issues right after this short break.
How is Timothy Plan continuing to lead the fight as you guys now enter your fourth decade of leading this fight of biblically responsible investing?
We've been too silent for too long, and we can no longer be silent. You stand up like Ronald Reagan said, we're only one generation away from losing all of our liberty. Yeah. It has to be fought for. I wish it didn't. And you can fight for it. You don't need guns and ammunition and that. You can fight for it, especially with your dollars, because it's always about the money. And when the money starts impacting people, they start paying attention. When we launched this, they said it couldn't be done, but here we are 30 years later. They said you couldn't get competitive returns, but here we are.
What a tremendous testament of God's grace.
Go to financialissues.org/Timothy Plans to learn more about Timothy Plan.
Kids need the hope of Jesus. There's so much loneliness, brokenness, isolation, and bullying. Now, you and I, we have the opportunity to do exactly what Jesus said, to go and make disciples right where they are, right inside their public school. The Lord has been building the impact of Crossroads Kids Club, and we ask for your help to pursue a vision of greater national expansion.
To join us, visit reachOurschools.com. That's reachOurschools.com.
Hearing Jesus say, "Well done," how to secure your rewards in heaven. Don't you want to be sure that when you get there, that you're going to have the best life forever? And that best life forever is being able to access the plethora of wonderful, escalating rewards that are elucidated throughout the book of Revelation to those who overcome. Well, that's what the book's about, friend.
Order your copy of Hearing Jesus Say Well Done today on Amazon and start living for what truly matters.
Thanks for sticking with us here today, Seth. You want to tell your joke?
Yeah, it's delightful, Shana. So listen, folks, the elites don't want you to know this, but the Wuhan lab and DeepSeek have one thing in common, Shana, and that's viral leaks.
No, that was funny. Yeah.
Of course, Seth, now the elites do want you to know it.
That's right.
Because they're saying, actually, it probably did come
the
from
CIA
the Wuhan
confirmed it, right, Sam?
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, 4.5 years late.
4 years too late. We all knew.
Yeah, but that was just misinformation, right?
That's right. That's right.
Disinformation, misinformation, whatever you want to call it. All right. Well, we continued the conversation kind of during the break for all of you who didn't get to listen. Seth was asking, even with NVIDIA being down so much, isn't it up a lot? So, and the answer was yes. So, in the last 4 years, NVIDIA is up 1,000%. Now, NVIDIA hasn't been on our buy list in some time, just because it had really taken off. There are some issues that we're watching with NVIDIA for BRI. It is technically still clean, so we have not issued a sell alert on it. And NVIDIA did yesterday. They came out and made a statement, and I don't want to put words in their mouth, but the way that I interpreted the statement, the way that what they said was, we still have the best chip and you need it. So, I think NVIDIA is still clearly the leader here. And and China needs their chips. And it'll be interesting to see, what the Trump administration's response is, what the next shot fired back in this economic war that we're having with China. So it'll be interesting to see. We've got a call waiting. Let's go ahead and get to that call. We've got John calling from Alabama. Hi, John. You're live on Financial Issues.
Hello, Shana. I'm a member, and I just have a question. I remember Dan saying a long time ago about mutual funds are slow to recover after they take large dips. And I was just wondering if that was true about the ETFs, and I'll listen to you on the other side. Thank you. Have a blessed day.
Sounds good. Thanks for that question, John. So, I think what's behind all of that is the very nature of mutual funds. So what mutual fund is a pooled investment. So you have a lot of investors that come together. They buy into a mutual fund. The mutual fund has a set of professional managers that decides what to buy and sell on a daily basis based on the objective of the fund and the rules of the fund. So for investors to know whether they should be buying into a fund or not, they have to know what they're getting into. So, a fund in its prospectus has a stated objective, and it could say something like, we invest in fixed income to try to get a good yield. We don't invest in things that are below investment grade. It could say we're an equity fund and we concentrate primarily on large and mid-sized companies who show great growth prospects. Or it could say, we invest in small cap companies that are that have great valuations. So there's so many. It could say it invests in international funds. So what you're getting into when you go into a mutual fund, and if you're a mutual fund investor, you're going to buy enough mutual funds to be properly diversified, so that because you are trying to lower the market risk in your portfolio by having all your bases covered. Now, what happens is that because when people buy into mutual funds, they put money into the fund, which means that the managers now have to deploy that cash, whether they want to or not, because a lot of mutual funds will say, the fund has to be 90% invested or 95% invested or whatever it might be. So when the market is really high, these fund managers are having to put money to work. This phenomenon is also kind of intensified by investor sentiment. So it's just been kind of a well-studied and documented fact that when the market is doing well, people want to get invested, and people tend to go in at the high of the market. So as the news is good, people are hearing that their neighbor made a lot of money, their coworker made a lot of money in a certain fund. So they feel comfortable, they feel confident, they want to put money in. So what is driving the market at that point in time is greed, right? So you hear about all of these, great stories, and you want to get in on the action, so you invest your money. What tends to happen on the flip side, when the market takes a turn for the worse, it's fear that is driving the market at that point in time. And so investors a lot of times will pull their money out because they get afraid. And so what happens, as the same way that the fund managers had to invest money that was coming in, whether they could really find a good deal for it or not, the same thing happens on the flip side. So as mutual fund investors are selling their shares and getting out, the fund managers have to create cash for redemptions. So now they're forced to sell things maybe at a not such ideal time. So they may have to, when they want to be putting money into certain positions, maybe they're having to take money out of certain positions so that shareholders can get their investments back, so that they can liquidate their shares. So that's kind of the theory behind why mutual funds take a little bit longer to recover. It has a lot to do with investor mentality. So do ETFs have the same problem? Well, not exactly. So they work a little bit differently. So you may not have that same phenomenon happening with the ETFs. So, I prefer a strategy which is what we offer our partners, which is you sort of build your own portfolio based on what's on our buy list. You're putting together your own little mutual fund or your own little ETF, and you don't really have that pressure to deal with. The only time that your portfolio is forced to go to cash is if you decide to do it. So you have more of a decision on, what you buy, when you sell, so on and so forth. So if you're not a partner, we encourage you to check out our strategy. We have lots of videos on the website. We give you asset allocation models, which we think is the most important factor. We encourage you not to be led by your emotions, which is, I believe, scriptural in nature. The Bible tells us that our hearts are inherently wicked, always bent toward sin and doing evil. And so it takes a real conscious effort not to give into fear and greed, because fear and greed, neither one are good for us, as human beings. They lead us into a lot of times making really bad decisions. So, we encourage you to be disciplined, to take an investment approach, to not be driven by either fear nor greed, but by a prudent desire to invest, to plan for your future. I mean, part of being a good steward, I believe, is giving, number one, using your resources in an efficient manner, and, saving for a time when you may fall on hard times or hard circumstances, or that you may want to transition to a different style of living. Like you may want to retire at some point in time and not get up and go to the same job every day that provides income, but you may want to build up a nest egg that can provide income in the future so that you can, do a different kind of work. Maybe you can be more kingdom focused in retirement. You can just make that shift. So speaking of biblical wisdom, and what we can find in the scriptures, let's go to the stewardship verse of the day. It comes from 2 Corinthians 9:7. So let each one give as he purposes in his heart, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver. So God has a sovereign plan for all humanity. It is a good plan because we have a good God who is love. God made the earth and everything in it, therefore it all belongs to him. So money is a medium which makes the world go round. What I mean by that is that it's through the use of money that we're able to put a roof over our heads, to put food in our bellies, to put gas in our cars, to fund the kingdom, to fund the advancement of the kingdom, or to fund evil things. It is how evil is funded, and it is how good is funded. So God's plans and purposes will prevail whether we choose to participate or not. God doesn't need our money. He owns it all. He can create it out of thin air if he wants, but because God created everything, he owns it all. So getting to partner with God in his work in the earth through giving is a great privilege. It is not a burden. So we're encouraged here that we shouldn't feel compelled to give. We shouldn't feel obligated to give. We should see giving as a privilege to partner with God in his work. So the verse that we read today follows a verse in the Bible that reveals the law of reciprocity, the law of reaping and sowing. So just as real and time-tested as the law of gravity is the law of reciprocity. Stingy planters get stingy crops, and lavish planters get bumper crops. At the end of the day, we decide not only if we give, but how much we give and where we give. We choose the action, but God's laws ultimately reign. What do you think, Seth?
Yeah, this is great, Shana. I love this verse here. It's some confusion needs to be cleared up right off the bat, though. Some people will read this verse and they'll say, well, since God loves a cheerful giver and I'm not feeling too cheery right now about giving, I guess this doesn't apply to me. That is not true. Okay, yeah. It doesn't abscond the non-cheerful givers from giving. What this verse shows us is it expects us to give first, and secondly, it's how we are to give. That when we give, we need to do it cheerfully. We need to train our hearts to love giving. We need to train our hearts to enjoy it because we realize how greatly we've been shown this great generosity also. And I think that comes from humility, Shana. When we realize how much God has given us and what we deserve, I think that's where we get our hearts right, is when we realize, far too often, I've done this before too, like we think, I'm doing a good job, I deserve to be kindling wood for all eternity.
We do.
Like we do. And so what we've been given is so much better than that, not just our salvation, but all the other good gifts as well. Good reminder.
Yeah. Absolutely. So you're right. It is once we come to the truth that God owns everything and that He's good, our right response is to want to honor Him. And that's the way that we do it. So let us just encourage you today, be a joyful, generous, and obedient giver. We call that funding the light, by the way. Well, folks, if you're listening on an outlet that only carries a short version of the show, we hope that you have found out how to get the full version on podcast, Apple, Spotify, or by going to our phone app. You can download it from the App Store. For everyone else, stay tuned. We're going to be back with more financial issues right after this.
In the last 10 to 15 years being in ministry, being married, something that has been constant in our lives is Samaritan Ministries. As we've moved, we've had babies, we've had different things come up, we have just been able to rely on Samaritan in ways that we never really even thought about before becoming members.
Our heart's desire is to plant roots and be in a place for a really long time. It's how we were raised. We see the benefits of that, but we also see the open-handedness of being used by the Lord wherever He calls, because we just assumed when we started pursuing church planting, the quickest way to get from point A to point B is a straight line. And with the Lord, sometimes you find out it looks a lot more like this. And yet, Samaritan was with us through the entire thing.
We didn't have to look into, we have to change insurances now because we've moved states or whatever the case may be. And it's just been a real blessing to us in different phases of life.
I'm Kyle.
I'm Colleen.
We're the Gen X.
And we're Samaritan members.
What a joy to be on your program here, to be able to say thank you to the thousands of Financial Issue Stewardship Ministry listeners who have underwritten ultrasound machines and sessions for these young girls. We've seen over 60,000 of them saved this year alone because of financial issues and the partnership that we have together. Praise God. Just so thankful for it. And for you, the listeners of Financial Issues, we're just really grateful on your behalf to be able to say to these young moms, we're here for you. We've got a place to stay if you get kicked out. We've got a doctor visit for you if you don't have money. We've got maternity clothes for you because of financial issues, because of what we're doing together with Preborn. If you want to invest in a ministry that saves lives with Preborn and does a whole bunch of other things, Financial Issues is the place to place your money. These rewards are waiting for us in heaven.
Learn more about Preborn by visiting preborn.com.
Pharrell came to Crossroads as a fourth grader. His name had been brought to my attention by the school principal. She was concerned about the direction he was heading.
I remember I wasn't the best kid. I got into trouble a lot.
He became a very active part of Crossroads Kids Club.
Mr. Engel, he was the leader that really impacted my life in so many ways. I honestly didn't want Crossroads to end.
We would invite all the students to come to our youth group here at Waterfront.
I felt God saying, come on, come to me. It felt like I was set free.
And I'll never forget the day when we had the privilege and the honor to baptize Pharrell.
I hugged Mr. Engel. I don't know if he understands. I'm truly, thankful to have him through the whole journey. If it wasn't for Crossroads, I probably wouldn't be in the place that I am right now. I wouldn't be a follower of Christ.
Help reach more kids like Pharrell with the hope of the gospel. Visit reachourschools.com.
Securities offered through G.A. Reppel & Company, a registered broker-dealer and investment advisor, member FINRA and SIPC. Opinions expressed by Shana are hers alone and are for informational purposes only and do not necessarily represent those of G.A. Reppel or the outlet on which you are listening. You should consider how the information applies to your situation prior to personally implementing it and consult any financial professional you work with to make sure it's applicable to your financial plan.
Hey, thanks for sticking with us here, folks. on financial issues. Good to be back here. A lot of you on the chat there. I'll be taking us the rest of the way here. Hey, John from Alabama. Shana was very grateful to answer your question, brother. We appreciate your question a whole lot. If anyone also, if you're watching on the chat right now, you might need to refresh your screen. If you just do that really quickly, you should be able to get the feed back up now. So just go ahead and do that. Of course, if it's frozen, you wouldn't have heard me say that, but I'm assuming that it is not there. So that's good stuff. All right, Sam. So we had a comment here in the chat that I want to get to kick off this headline. Really, really good one here. So Eddie was asking, is it true that Trump signed an executive order to ban trans people from the military? Sam, can you shed some light on that for us?
Well, it's not clear to me he actually signed a executive order completely banning transgender people from the military. However, these executive orders are aggressively cracking down on how much we're facilitating transgender nonsense in the military. According to that executive order, I'm looking at a little bit of it right here. What it does is it ends taxpayer funds for being used for transgender surgeries. The order will also ban males from using facilities meant for females, including bathrooms and sleeping areas as well. Trump is also rescinding, on top of that, a whole host of other things that President Biden allowed transgender service members to do in the military. So not exactly a ban per se, but you could certainly say that it's paving the road for a ban. I do want to tell you a little bit of the numbers here because they're quite incredible. According to the New York Post, the Pentagon has spent more than $15 million on transgender medical services for military personnel since January 1st of 2016. $3.1 million of those dollars went to gender reassignment surgeries for over 240 people. That's according to a report from 2021. So it's very possible, Seth, that number is much higher because you're leaving out much of the Biden administration for that report. So regardless to say, it's great news from Donald Trump that he's ending this wasteful and frankly counterproductive spending for the military.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And this is the first step, Sam. So we were talking about this during the break. Picture this, folks. This should give you a lot of comfort, all right? China looks at us and says, boy, the U.S., they're really strong. They've spent all this money on defense spending? No. On building up the military strength? No. On transgender ideology in the military. I am so thankful that this nonsense is getting removed, Sam. I'm so thankful. And I am so okay with my tax dollars being spent on this. I'm okay with it. I don't like paying taxes. But if we have taxes, this is what it's supposed to be spent on. It's supposed to be spent on unfortunately, cleaning up the messes of former administrations, which I wish that they hadn't spent my tax dollars on silly things. But it's meant on spending on military strengthening. That's one of the roles of government. Infrastructure, upholding the law, all good things. You want to spend my tax dollars, spend it on that stuff. Yeah. That's really good. That's really good.
And I'm sure that these executive orders are going to be carried out with alacrity because now we finally have Pete Hegseth. He got confirmed as the defense secretary last week by the skin of his teeth. It was a 50-50 vote with J.D. Vance breaking that tie. But he's been all about lethality in the military. What a novel concept. Who knew the whole point of the military was to kill people? But that's in line with these executive orders. One of them also says that we'll be now discharging service members who identify as transgender or are receiving transgender treatments if they fail to meet physical and mental fitness requirements. So we're not going to be changing our requirements just to allow some guy who thinks he's a girl into the military so we can feel all good about ourselves. That's not the point of the military. It's not a social club so people can feel good. It's to kill our enemies.
Absolutely. And, Sam, this is an interesting thing, too, to have someone in this position that Pete Hegseth is in, and I know there's some controversy surrounding him, but someone who appears by all rights to be a professing Christian and is not ashamed of that, pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool to see that.
He praised Jesus multiple times, both at his confirmation, then after being sworn in. It's really incredible. We also saw something similar from Marco Rubio as well, the new Secretary of State. So very good things to see.
Yeah,
also, speaking of confirmations, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that Scott Bessent, Trump's Treasury pick, has now been officially confirmed. Not nearly as controversial a pick. He wasn't passed on nearly a narrow margin as Pete Hegseth, but he is in now. So Trump's cabinet is coming together.
Yeah, absolutely. Sam, question for you. Why do you think Hegseth, why was it such a narrow margin? Do you think it's just the controversy surrounding him? I think it's just people don't like that he has a Crusader tattoo? Like, what is it? What's the deal?
There's a couple things. I mean, if you listen to what people were talking about during the confirmation hearings, Democrats were upset. One, by a lot of the things he said about getting rid of transgender people in the military, questioning the role of women in the military. They also brought up issues about his personal life. He has a pretty checkered past with women, although it does appear that that has led in some ways to his conversion story. It does, at least on the face of it, look like that part of his life's behind him. He's repented from that, but that was an issue that was raised as well. I think there was also questions whether or not this comes from your more elite side of Congress, that because he's never has had a history as a general or something like that, that is he really fit to be in charge of the military? I don't think that that's a valid criticism. You had Pete Buttigieg in charge of the transportation department, and he had no idea what he was doing with that. Pete Hegseth has a long history of military service and also a history of coming up with ideas and expressing support for the military service members, how to improve the military, working with veterans associations. So he's certainly not a novice when it comes to this stuff, and I think that an outsider perspective could be helpful.
Absolutely. No, that's great, Sam. Thank you. And, folks, we're going to see a lot of this, I think, ending the trans military funding, also coming alongside of right now, Trump is trying to restore the country in every way. So there's ongoing border battles right now, as we're seeing. Many kerfluffles have arisen against Trump's deportation policies. You're seeing celebrities speaking out and crying crocodile tears, and different things like that. These people are actors, by the way, folks. That's their job. I heard yesterday ICE made almost 1,200 arrests yesterday, which to date is their largest day of, arrestings and, basically, taking people out of the country that shouldn't be here during this second Trump administration. So, folks, listen, I'm for order being restored to our country. Absolutely, I'm also for loving your neighbor. I'm about all that stuff too. But I do believe that it's good for Christians to be good stewards of our country, folks, that we have a country that is orderly and protected. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. The people of God had that in the Old Testament as well. It's a good thing here. So good stuff to see there, folks. Hey, we saw this headline from last week. I wanted to get to it. We did see consumer sentiment drop last week. So that's according to the UMich consumer sentiment. Decreased from 74 to 71.1. That's the first drop in 6 months. Current economic conditions, meanwhile, those declined from 71.1 to 74. The index of consumer expectations also decreased from 73 to about 69. So that's what we're looking like there. Take a look at the markets, what they're doing right now. As they sit, let me refresh my page here. So the markets are all pretty close to the flat line right now, though it should be noted that different from the pre-markets, you heard Shana mention that the NASDAQ was trending positive in the pre-markets. It's now dipped negative, but it's down only about it's less than 0.5%, so nowhere near the losses that it had yesterday. The S&P 500 is down right around 1/10. The Dow Jones is barely above the flat line, also right above about 0.1% positive. So that's what we're looking like here for the markets, folks. We've got more financial issues coming up on the other side of this break. Some very interesting things happening in the BRI world and the DEI world, specifically with our old friends Target. And I don't call them friends in a way that I actually mean that. I mean that sarcastically. But some very good, potentially really amazing news coming out of Target there. So we'll look at that in just a moment. But we've got Craig Halgard coming up with the Ag Report right now. Stick with us. We'll be right back.
This is Craig Halgard with your Financial Issues Ag Update for January 24th. On the one traders focused on South American weather yesterday, and that propelled the March futures to new highs weather models, which showed an
Sorry about that, guys. We had a little bit of a technical snafu with the Ag Report. Carry on, Seth.
We'll jump back in. That's all good, man. All good. Sometimes the ag just goes crazy, so we just got to keep going. That's all good. So what we're seeing here also, folks, real quickly, we'll jump to some earnings. We did get earnings out yesterday. AT&T, not one of the big ones, but important to mention. Earnings per share increased a little bit. Total profits right around $4.08 billion. Revenue was right around what was expected there. I believe tomorrow is going to be, again, our big day for earnings. So we'll keep an eye out there for that as well. I do appreciate so many of you, again, on the chat there with us this morning. So thank you to Daniel for joining, and Claude, and of course Brian and Kara, Noah, John, Lisa, Uncle John, Joseph, Robert. Good to see so many of you on the chat this morning. Also, we do have a lot of listeners over on Facebook. Alejandro is a faithful listener. He says good morning a lot. So good morning to you, Alejandro, and blessings to you, brother. Mark, also blessings to you. So appreciate you all so much there. By the way, folks, if you do want to join the conversation in a more personal way, the phone lines are still open, so you're welcome to call in at 610-363-1110. Again, coming up next here, you're not going to want to miss what's happening out of Target. This is exciting news that has kind of been 2 to 3 years in the making. So we'll get to that on the other side of this break here. But we got more financial issues coming up right here. We'll try to get the ag report cleaned up here for you folks so we can post that on the website later today for our farmers and ranchers. More financial issues right after this. Stick with us.
It's up to us to stand up and say, enough is enough. All of this unbiblical stuff that's going on, whether it's abortion or transsexual or LGBTQ, widespread pornography, human trafficking. Bottom line, it's still up to us. If we stop investing in these corporations that are trying to destroy us, sooner or later they're going to wake up.
To learn more about biblically responsible mutual funds and ETFs, go to timothyplan.com.
I found out I was pregnant when I was 21 years old. For me, I was scared, I was shaking. They do an ultrasound, and that's when everything changed. When I saw my baby, and when I heard her heartbeat, that was it. We've seen the hand of God ever since we stepped into the pregnancy center.
To find out how you can support the life-saving mission of Preborn, go to preborn.com/FISM.
What separates Crossroads Kids Club from other ministries to reach school-age children? What sets you guys apart?
First of all is our connection with local churches. We mobilize, equip, train, support local church partners. We're right inside the schools. There's a number of ministries that try to serve public school children outside of the school, but we're able to be right there on the campus. Another key thing is just our values. Our highest value is actually relationships. And so we're not a ministry that's driven by a lot of fancy technology or flashy stuff, but rather getting adults who love Jesus and who love kids to sit on the floor with a group of kids, to listen to them, to love them. So I would say the relational emphasis and the simplicity of the model is actually something that makes Crossroads special as well.
Help reach kids with the hope of the gospel. Visit reachOurschools.com.
The opinions and recommendations expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of the station or any of the program sponsors. Additionally, all products or services offered by the program sponsors may not be known by the program.
Thanks for sticking with us here, folks, on Financial Issues. Great to be here with you all once again today. Markets now have all turned negative. So Dow Jones is now down about 0.1%, S&P 500 about 0.25%, NASDAQ same thing, about 0.25 percentage point. All right, folks. There's some really interesting things happening here in terms of DEI and one of the big foes that we have seen in really the last 3 years. And that, of course, is Target. Sam, what have we got here? We saw some very, very fascinating news over the weekend that, again, is like 2 or 3 years in the making.
Well, it's possible, Seth, that Target are foes no more, possibly, because on Friday, Target became the latest of the growing number of companies to roll back its DEI policies, ending participation in the HRC's pro-LGBT index. They're also ending their DEI goals and racial equity initiatives. Most importantly, they're no longer selling Pride merchandise to kids. That's according to Robbie Starbuck. They didn't make that as an official announcement, but he talked to them personally, and they said, yeah, we're we're no longer doing that either. They're also planning to reevaluate their quote-unquote corporate sponsorships and partnerships, which many is taking to mean that they're going to end any relationships with pride parades and pride events that are especially targeting kids. So very exciting. By the way, Seth, that change does come as President Trump, something that Shana was talking about, I think yesterday, he last week signed an executive order directing government agencies to investigate DEI programs at publicly traded corporations and other institutions with at least $500 million in assets. That executive order says that DEI could potentially be in violation of the Civil Rights Act, depending on how these various companies are applying the DEI programs.
Yeah. Sam, this is amazing news. This is really good. I mean, folks, this is something that we have looked at, and of course, this is not going to be a recommendation to buy Target. Absolutely. As we've talked about often, Sam, DEI and non-BRI, they're not the same thing. And we'll have to see patterns of success to even consider that, among other things as well. However, this really is kind of 2.5, 3 years in the making. I can remember, I think it was summer of 2023, I want to say. That was where Target really just went totally bananas.
Yep. If you're watching on TV right now, you can see that we're playing some B-roll. You can see all the crazy stuff they were selling to kids. Those tuck bathing suits so kids at the beach can pretend that they're transgender. Just insane stuff.
Absolutely. And it's important, folks, to keeping receipts, I think, can be a good thing here. We need to remember, Target did this stuff, and it seems like they have finally realized, okay, we seriously screwed up. We seriously messed this thing up. This has been a long battle, as we've seen. We saw them pull back a little bit from the tuck-friendly bathing suits and from other things like that, Sam, in last summer, I think it was. And so now, in 2025, it seems like maybe they've learned their lesson, Sam. Do you think they have?
I don't know, because it does depend on, is this really just pressure coming from the Trump administration? Saying, listen, man, we're going to go after you if you're using DEI to discriminate against people. So they're just chucking the whole thing out to avoid lawsuits. So I don't know. It's hard to say with Target because, as I said, sometimes you have companies that are just doing these things because the cultural trends are going that way and they don't want to catch any flack from the left. I think a lot of companies behave that way. But then there's other companies that are true believers, and I'm tempted to say that Target, at least in the past, has been one of those companies. You were saying, Seth, that it's been in the last couple years that they've been bad at this stuff, but really, if you remember, going all the way back to 2016, they were one of the first companies to welcome transgender people into the bathroom. They were allowing biological men in a dress to go into their women's bathroom. I remember at the time people were calling for boycotts. Then we became so desensitized to that because other companies were doing it too. But Target was one of the first adopters of that when there was really no reason to at all. So this is a huge shift for them regardless of why they're doing it.
This is, and Sam, I do think this is just part of the cultural tide that we're seeing. Like, this is related to the Trump military stuff that we talked about in the last segment. Something is changing here. And like you said, it might not be a change of heart. Might not be a change of heart, absolutely. But again, this is results-based. And so we're excited about it. So that's awesome stuff, folks. I think Target's learned its lesson that people just want to buy stuff. They just want to be able to go and buy diapers for the kids. They want to go and buy that expensive cereal that sort of, doesn't taste all that great, but doesn't have all the seed oils in it. Like, they want to go and buy that stuff.
With Target, it's their branding.
Right.
They know how to brand stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So this is not a promotion to buy them. Absolutely not. We need to see, there's many things that would need to happen before I think we would even consider that once again. But again, this is the necessary first step. Without this, there's no chance, right, Sam? I mean, this is I think the first step that might need to happen. For sure.
I mean, you go back in the day, look at the stocks that Dan used to recommend. It was things like McDonald's and Walmart, all these major companies that now we wouldn't even think of touching with a 10-foot pole because they're so bad. But that used to be the world we lived in some 10, 20 years ago. So hopefully this is a sign we're going to slowly but surely go back to that place of sanity.
Absolutely. For sure, Sam. And so, Sam, now I think it's good for us to address somewhat of the elephant in the room in a kind of teeing it up for Shana. So folks, Shana's going to talk more about this tomorrow, but I've seen a question in the chat there about Costco. what to do about Costco now, because there's this battle. We had the meeting last week, and the shareholders voted overwhelmingly to keep the DEI stuff. So the question now,
98%, Seth.
Yeah,
98%
crazy stuff.
of the
Tell us about that, Sam. What happened at that meeting last week?
So, in case you don't know what's going on with Costco, they were one of these companies that the shareholders, activist shareholders inside the company, proposed a challenge to their DEI program. I didn't look at it in too much detail, but my understanding it was not so much to get rid of DEI per se, but it was a review of the DEI processes inside the company, seeing if they risked the bottom line of the company and potentially would open things up to lawsuits. I think it was something along those lines. So it would at least have opened the door to ending DEI, if I'm understanding that correctly. But more than 98% of shareholders, they said, no, we don't want to do that. We want to keep DEI. Even members of the board were saying, we want DEI. It's good for our company, was their view. So it's quite disappointing. We were really hoping that they would overturn it because, DEI is the breeding ground for so many of the things, especially with abortion and LGBT stuff that seep into companies. So in our opinion, it's best if companies just get rid of it. It's not all bad news, or this is potentially whistling past the graveyard. I don't know. That proposal came from the National Center for the Public Policy Research. That's a conservative think tank. Their deputy director, he's still optimistic that Costco is going to eventually get rid of DEI. He said, quote, just months before Boeing dropped DEI, they opposed our shareholder proposal requesting an audit of their DEI efforts. So Costco doubling down on their proxy statement is not as meaningful as has been made out to be. So what he's saying is, listen, we've seen this before from other companies who rejected similar proposals, and what do you know, a couple months down the pike, they reversed themselves. I don't know if that's the case with Costco. 98% seems like a lot of shareholders. It does. But maybe he's right. Things can change.
Yep. So, folks, this is important for us, of course. As you know, Costco is one of the stocks on our broad list right now. Absolutely. And so we're going to be looking into this deeply. Shana's going to be looking at this in a little bit more in-depth tomorrow. So, we just wanted to kind of get the ball rolling here to let you know that we're on top of this. We're looking at this, and we'll keep on watching it, Sam. For sure. This, folks, is just a good reminder for us again as well to see that there is a difference between DEI and non-BRI. It's not that equal sign between them. There is a difference between them. However, like Sam, I think it's well worth it, Sam, to say that this is the breeding ground for that stuff. Yeah. This is where non-BRI things get born and hatched and grow. So it doesn't always mean that it happens, but it can.
DEI is like smoking cigarettes for a company. If you smoke a lot of cigarettes, there's a good chance you're going to get cancer. Not necessarily. Right. If you're a company with DEI programs, there's a good chance you're not going to be BRI, but not necessarily.
Yep. Absolutely. Sam, we had seen, I think it was probably, I want to say like maybe 3 or 4 years ago, it was ESG, right? That was the big thing, and now DEI has kind of replaced that. It was kind of the big talking point on the left was this is the way to do socially conscious investing, all that stuff, folks. That stuff in the final analysis, that is not going to get you to the true treasure. The true treasure is found in honoring God with what He has given you. And folks, we believe here at the ministry that the biblically responsible model is, in the final analysis, from an eternal perspective, the most successful. It really is. It really is. And it doesn't mean that if you do BRI investing, you're going to say, all right, well, I'm not going to make a lot of money, but at least I'm honoring God. Yay. Oh, no, that's not the way it works. That's absolutely not. It's not a guarantee of success. But we found that BRI investing is wonderfully successful because God blesses obedience. Right? God blesses obedience. He's not going to forget His people who are obeying Him with the money that He has given to them, that understanding that it all belongs to Him. He's not going to forget that. Now, the rewards may come in glory, and as Dan used to say, I'll take that in glory. That's far better. It's far better than the rewards here. But God may bless us here as well. We believe, folks, ultimately that the way to do it. This is the way to do it. And so that's the strategy that we have. That's not going to change. And it never will change for as long as we're on the air. As long as we're in existence, we will be doing biblically responsible investing. So, boy, lots to talk about here. Kind of a teaser for tomorrow's show. You're going to want to tune in tomorrow as Shana will talk more about that. Make sure that you get your questions in early. Once again, folks, the best time to call the show, if you're thinking of a good time to call the show, the best time to call the show is 9:05 Eastern Time. That means if you're in Central Time, it is 8:05 Central Time. Get that call right in there, and Shana will be sure to get to you. If you've got questions about Costco, if you've got questions about some of the other things that we talked about today, that'd be a great thing to do. Call in right as the show begins. Boy, great to be here with you folks, as always. It was a joy. We'll do it again tomorrow, Lord willing, unless the Lord returns, of course. Until then, I'm Seth Udinsky, and we will see you tomorrow for more financial issues. Remember, it's all His. Let's be found good and faithful stewards. God bless.
If we ever forget that we're one nation under God, then we will be a nation gone under.
Thank you for joining us. This has been an FISM production.